could hear me.
Sorry.
Hello, hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you.
Let me just turn up my audio. Make sure you can hear me and see me okay, right?
Yes,
You look so familiar.
you do too. I
I feel
wonder.
like I don't know if we've talked in the past before or something. You look super familiar.
Well, one thing is for sure, we're here today.
Exactly, exactly. And I appreciate you doing this with me so much. It truly means a lot. We're starting this podcast series. I want to go live with it this year. So, just speaking to a bunch of dentists. I'm very excited about it. Where are you located?
And we're in Brooklyn and Park Slope specifically.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm from Connecticut. So, we're basically neighbors.
Okay.
Not too far, not too far. So, all right, let me just pull up some stuff and we can sort of dive in. All right. So, just to give you a little bit of context before we get started, I am the founder of Aura Digital. So, we partner with dental practices to help them increase their revenue by acquiring new patients. We've been doing this for more than 5 years now. So, we work with a lot of dentists, and now we're interviewing industry leaders just like yourself to gain market insights and more importantly, provide value through a podcast. That way, other dentists can listen in and learn from some of the insights and challenges that you may have faced. So, this usually takes 30 to 40 minutes. Does that work for you? Yeah, that's good?
That's good.
All right, perfect. So, we can just start off by you telling me who you are, what you do, and sort of the origin story of your practice.
Okay. Well, I'm Dr. Jamshai. I'm an orthodontist located in Park Slope in Brooklyn, and this year will be our 10th year anniversary.
Amazing.
So, I got my dental degree at the University of California in San Francisco, and I did my orthodontic training in University of Colorado in Denver. And then I moved to New York City, and I started working solely in Manhattan for a number of years.
Mhm.
But it wasn't satisfying for me, and I wanted to do something that was more rewarding in terms of service. So I partnered with a friend of mine who was a pediatric dentist that I originally met while we were in our dental school training in San Francisco. And we were attempting to basically change the way healthcare is being delivered to underserved
Mhm.
children, especially in outer boroughs. And so we worked together for about 6 years in trying to basically make healthcare more accessible, beginning with oral healthcare and specifically focusing on pediatric dentistry and me as the orthodontist following up with their orthodontic needs. Given to the changes that happened in the landscape of insurances and the
Mhm.
continuous and incessant corner cutting of
Ah,
benefits, it got really difficult for me personally, and also
yeah.
to support my parents who were living in California. I decided that at least for a few years to try private practice.
Wow.
And I was
Yeah.
so not happy with any other basically clinics that I work with. Uh,
Mhm.
I really did my best to stay away from having to manage and run a business. Uh,
Everyone does try to
uh,
stay away.
but, but it came to a point I realized I just knew I would not be satisfied if I just
Yeah.
continue to work for other people.
Mhm.
So I had a cup of tea with myself and faced the facts, and then I said, "Well, all right, let me just see what's out there." And as you may know, in a place like New York, in any desirable neighborhood, it's very difficult to find a place. And sometimes just the real
Yeah.
estate factor is the deciding factor where someone gets to or doesn't get the
Mhm.
opportunity to start a business.
Yeah.
It could be too small, it could be too little, excuse me, too little or too large. It could be too expensive,
Mhm.
just not in the right conditions. There's so many factors, and Lo and behold, the very first place that I saw was a immaculate landmark brownstone, very close to the park, very close to the train, and it
Yeah.
just a clear sign, light from the universe, whatever you believe in. So basically, I started to work on everything from the ground up, construction, designing, everything,
Yeah.
website, really most importantly, designing what this practice will do for the community and who it's
Mm-hmm.
for, and also who it's not for.
Yeah.
I didn't want to basically turn it into a revolving door, dock in a box practice where I'm,
Mm-hmm.
just churning, the wheel and trying to basically get as many patients and, making, ridiculous
Yeah.
income. Really wanted the quality and the personal aspect of the care to be there primarily and let everything else work out itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. No, I love to hear that. I love hearing people's like come up stories, how they actually got into business. Because again, it has, it's tough. It's not for everyone. It's definitely challenging, but the pros definitely outweigh the cons, especially when you have your own business. So, and 10 years, that's very impressive. And in New York too, especially like you were saying, like I'm so curious, like how do you survive in New York? Because New York is so competitive. Like the market is competitive, right?
Yes, that's true. And I think it's also true that they say the old saying goes, if you can do it in New York, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's so impressive.
So many of my colleagues found basically some little town which seemed to be
Yeah,
growing fast, and there was
yeah,
no orthodontist there, or there was few, and there was a demand for more. And financially, I think they're doing tremendously better than me. But for me, because of the community and
yeah.
diversity, also richness that the city has to offer, I
Mm-hmm.
decided to stay here. And yes, although in some ways financially may have not been as rewarding,
Yeah,
but there's just something about the city and also the community of friends and extended family that I have here has really made it worthwhile.
yeah,
And um, I feel in any area when one attempts to basically venture through and start their own business, whatever it is,
mm-hmm.
it really comes down to being very specific about who you're trying to serve and really putting yourself in their feet and saying, okay, what is it that the people that I'm trying to serve, what is it that they are looking for?
Yeah, yeah.
What matters to them? And really focusing on that versus saying, okay, I want to do this, and then how can I promote it and sell it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, starting with the needs of the patients. And for me, because I'd already lived in Brooklyn, very close to Park Slope, I'm in Brooklyn Heights, it's only a few minutes away. I feel, okay, these are the kind of people, like when I would go to small businesses, whether they're selling cookies or it's a coffee shop, it's a new restaurant, I always felt there's
Yeah.
a personal touch to it. And they're not trying to become the most famous restaurant, but they really care about the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like if
Mm-hmm.
if someone would give me a cup of coffee and I'm having a sip in it, and I have a funny look on my face, they would immediately ask, would you like me to change it? And whether it was the baker or the coffee shop, I got to know people personally, and I realized, okay, these are the people when they have kids and it's time for them to have races. I would love to I would love to see
Oh,
them.
yeah. Yeah.
It was, I think a big part of it has been for me to align with the culture because
Yes.
because it aligned with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been, helping me.
Yeah.
Because since I've opened this office up, I think there's that being, I think within a quarter mile radius, not a mile, less than a quarter mile radius, I think there's at least 5 more practices. And I hope they're
Wow.
all doing well. I mean, they're still here,
Yeah.
so.
Of course. Of course. Tell me a little bit about the community that you've personally built,
You mean on a personal side or?
like for your practice, like the type of people that come to your practice.
Well, incidentally, and to reasons unbeknown to me, somehow my practice seems to have appealed a lot more to adults, even though we're a very family kind of
Yeah.
oriented neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for the most part, I'd say my patients have been just slightly more adults than
Hmm.
have been teenagers, but that's also beginning to shift. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of families have like, second and third children, and it is really the highest compliment when I see the second child, of the family that's now,
Yeah.
reaching that stage where they need orthodontic treatment for them to come back or to refer, friends.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I always love hearing the stories of like dentists who have just worked on families over family and then, their children and the grandchildren. I think that's very fascinating. And it's really, heartwarming to hear that you have like this tight-knit community that you're building. I know how New York is, so and that's one thing I really appreciate, I feel like the businesses there, the small businesses, they're just happy with what they're doing and they enjoy that a lot.
Part of it comes with the place I decided to invest, my time and
Yeah.
energy and attention and emotional labor, as the saying goes, is that the neighborhood that I work in is a neighborhood, like unlike many areas in the city. So
Hmm.
Manhattan, for example, where I practiced for over from 2007 until it was about 2022, I think. Um, there's a lot of commuter traffic, and a lot of people would choose to see a dentist or an orthodontist there because they happen to be working in the next block, but they lived in Connecticut and Long Island in Jersey. Uh, so yes, in certain areas in Manhattan, for example, or other metropolitan areas, I can imagine, there's kind of a neighborhood feel.
Yeah.
But if their job changed, or as during COVID, a lot of these people started working from home. I know
Hmm.
a lot more people saying, okay, well, I lived in Brooklyn. I used to go to the city, and I was thinking of starting treatment there. But now I work from home, so I don't have to go to the city. So I'm looking for a an orthodontist or a dentist that's close to my house. That's
Yeah.
also a part of it. Again, where we choose to practice, I think, will greatly impact, what kind of people we'll be serving.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And going back to your 10 years, like, how have you been able to grow this business? Like, what would you say are like the top three things that you have learned so far?
Well, I'm not a very good businessman, and I'm sure if I have really any business advice. I can tell you what I did and what I didn't do
Yeah.
that um, has gotten me to this point. My emphasis from day one has been about really taking care of people
Hmm.
when they, like, for me, it's a huge compliment. Even people when people come for a complimentary consultation, the fact that they're choosing me is is priceless. To me,
Yeah.
that means that they're trusting me to take care of their smile or their children, their family.
Hmm.
Do the best that I can and make sure that I'm stay in touch with that person,
Yeah.
family, and of course follow that throughout the treatment, and let the work speak for itself. It's a
Hmm.
slower curve than trying to
Yeah.
really bombard, the market, whether it's physical or virtual, and trying to, wave at everyone and trying to attract people. I didn't go that route, so it was a slower growth curve, but it's been
Yeah.
very consistent, and I think that's what's contributed to my continuous and steady growth.
Hmm.
A little bit more like a walnut tree versus a bamboo, which gets, really tall really fast
Yeah.
and have very strong roots.
I love that. Yeah. And so I know you mentioned right now that you've gone the slow route. So what do you mean by that? Like, and especially with
For
like
example,
prior
I
patients.
had already experienced what it means to get into the insurance game.
Hmm.
We just recently heard, after this unfortunate incident happened to the CEO of
Yeah.
United Healthcare. So, like, to me, that an insurance company in this economy where everybody's feeling the tension and the pressure, especially after COVID and going through COVID, is
Hmm.
like, I think over $22 billion. Where did this money come from, right?
Yeah.
How could an insurance company make $22 billion? Well, we have countries just on the other side of the Atlantic where everybody gets universal health care, you know. So
Hmm.
you have a third party taking money from millions of Americans and putting it in the pocket of private investors while they are getting denied healthcare. So, I mean, that's just like a macro perspective, but on a micro perspective, I could see
Yeah.
that each year they're cutting corners, they're just making it more difficult for patients to get approved, um, denying claims, and also on our side, reducing the continuously. It's a little bit like compound interest, where it
Hmm.
doesn't seem like much, but interest adds on interest adds on interest, and all of a sudden you realize, well, over like 20, 30 years, you paid 3 times as much as you borrowed,
Yeah.
for example. So they would. I felt like that's the opposite is happening. That they're continuously, like every year, they're paying us for a few percent less. But then
Hmm.
we look over a 5, 10 year period. So wow, like this is not where it started. And when did it
Yeah.
happen? Because it was very gradual.
Yeah.
So I've realized that when anyone in my shoes is kind of bound to a very low fee for
Hmm.
a service that can take, a year and a half, can take 2 years, sometimes 2.5 years,
Yeah.
then I would be forced to basically finish a patient and have to like really finish them on not just on time, but maybe even earlier so that I could work on the
Yeah.
next patient, so on and so forth. And I realized, okay, this is not a game I want to play, even if
Hmm.
it benefits me financially, because it compromises my ethics. I mean, most of us who become specialists, especially,
Hmm.
we have, maybe to our own detriment, a sense of perfectionism.
Hmm.
So when we see something that the patient might not even be aware of, let's say if it's a tooth all the way in the back that is growing kind of weirdly at the end of the treatment because the patient was 10 years old when they started, they didn't have second molars, and now they're 12. Treatment,
Yeah.
but that tooth is growing very, oddly, and it needs correction. It's going to extend the treatment. I'm the kind of person I always educate my patients. I say, okay, this has
Yeah.
happened, expected. Would you like to go ahead and correct it? And some patients say, well, I can see what it is, but I really want to finish my treatment because I'm moving or because I don't want to wear aligners or I want to get my braces off.
Hmm.
So a lot of patients will say, well, thank you so much. We would have not have known that.
Yeah.
So not getting into the business of working with insurance and working on quantity is something that I chose to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
We of course help all of our patients. We help process their insurance, approve their claims and all that. But I know some other colleagues basically who tried to go and dive and just become the cheapest person.
Yes.
You know, I'm
Unfortunately.
not saying it's a wrong thing, but it's not for me. It's not for me and the kind of
Hmm.
person that I am and the kind of providers in any area of healthcare that anyone may be working. And it's also not for every patient because there are patients, there are people, let's modern when it comes to food. There are restaurants that are trying to be the cheapest, and there are people who are trying to find the cheapest food for whatever reason. And
Hmm.
that's okay, that's perfectly okay. But I think it's all about, finding. I used to work in some of these seemingly high-end practices in
Yeah.
university, for example. It's just a really posh area in Manhattan. I would have patients tell me things such as this, and I'm quoting a patient, I'm not changing anywhere.
Yeah.
They would lean over to me and say, Dr. Shah, you are a good doctor. Why are you working in this practice? You know?
Yeah.
And it either had to do with someone at the front desk or the manager or something that was completely out of my control. So I have to thank all of these patients because I feel like we get to know ourselves through our relationships, personally and professionally. And
100%.
seeing the feedback from patients verbally and also, for example, on Google or wherever they would reviews, sometimes it'd be short, but sometimes it'd be very lengthy and very meaningful. And realize like the
Yeah.
impact I had a chance to make for this patient. I would not have if I was going to cut corners and just rush things. So
Hmm.
that's, I would not necessarily call it a strategy. I don't know how much it's benefited me financially, but it is a career and a
Yeah.
style that I chose for myself.
Yeah, yeah. And I bet like I just patients, even from talking to other dentists who take the time to educate their patients, they appreciate it so much. I see the reviews all the time because I do manage a lot of their like social media and stuff, and these reviews are incredible when they take the time to just sit with the patient, talk to them, chat about their, situation, take the time instead of like rushing. But obviously that takes a certain doctor to do that, and a certain mentality, you know? So,
And it's really hard to sometimes, stay committed to the values that
hmm
we chose to practice. One of my, I don't know this man personally, but he's really been a mentor all along. His name is Seth Godin, and he's referred to as one of the kind of grandfathers of marketing, not advertising, but marketing.
I know. Yeah.
The way he frames it is very different. It's something I was already doing in a way. And one of the things that's very relevant to the conversation we're having is that he says if you go to Nike and say, okay, I want a $10 pair of sneakers, they're not going to be upset at you. They're not going to be mad at you. They
Yeah.
actually may be very happy to say, hey, we don't have what you're looking for, but there's a Payless Shoe Store down the street, and they can help you. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
a different approach. For example, sometimes I might have a patient that might come in and say, well, what about this? What if I do that? What if that? And it's like, it becomes like a haggling, about
hmm
price. Which if we try to stay as affordable as possible. I mean, just the price of
Yeah.
coffee. I think in the past 5 years during COVID, even the price of like, daily commodities like a sandwich, everything's probably increased over 40, 50,
Oh,
60.
yeah. Yeah.
But we've kept our fees very similar, to what it was, I'd say even beyond 6 years ago.
Wow.
Uh, because I understand the hardship. If a family has 3 children and all 3 of them need treatment, that's a huge investment. I mean, things are already expensive as it is.
hmm
I want to be available for them. Of course, I want to basically make a reasonable profit so I can pay my own bills and pay my staff.
Exactly. Yeah.
But by basically, it's not that we're saying no to any patients, but when a patient says, oh, can you do this for half the price? We're like, sorry, we would love to. I actually would love to do it for free if I could.
Yeah.
But
Wouldn't we all?
sorry, like we can help you with extended payments. We can
hmm
help you lower your down payments and all these things that, of course, my treatment coordinators manage.
Yeah.
But being okay with, understanding that, okay, our practice may not be for everyone. Because I
Yeah.
realize that by saying that we are able to basically continue to provide the level, the quality of care that our patients aspire, to experience.
hmm Yeah. And I 100% agree with you on the whole, you know, not everyone is going to be the right fit, right? But still being able to help them out in some way of like, hey, maybe you try that option or you go over there, right? I'm a big believer in that as well, because at the end of the day, even with marketing and sales, one of the my favorite sayings is your a sales essentially is helping the person make the best decision for themselves. So not necessarily, what you want to do, what you want to achieve, but what is it that the other person, what's best for them. Um,
Ironically, the opposite of that also holds true. I sometimes have had patients who've been through a couple of rounds of orthodontic treatment, and they'll come in
yeah,
with either a CD or a stack of, photos and all that. And I'll look at them and say, well, let me speak to your previous orthodontist and see why wasn't they could make you happy. And I see, okay, where they were and where they ended and how everything that could have been done was done. And even though this person now believes, that I'm like the best orthodontist in town and I'm going to somehow do something magical is going to satisfy them, even
yeah,
though I've already spent, couple of, a consultation, 2 follow-up, conversations with their previous doctors and dentists and orthodontists, and now
yeah,
spend another 20 minutes with them, and I'll tell them, listen, I don't think I can help you. So I think discernment and selecting the cases we work with. Because our work is very different than dentists.
Yeah, yeah.
Most dental procedures, whether it's surgical or restorative, is procedure based. So
Hmm.
finish in a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, we'll see our patients, multiple times, several times, dozens of times over the course of 6 months, 10 months, sometimes two, sometimes even longer than that, like maybe 2.5 years. So
Yeah.
it becomes a relationship, and it's very important to
Yeah.
be very discerning. And believe it or not, they really don't teach us much about any of the things that we're talking about when we.
In school, right? You gotta learn on your own. I've heard that a lot, and it's just the unfortunate truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, and I know we're coming up at the 5:30 mark, so we can definitely start wrapping up a little bit, but I'm curious, like I know your focus is on helping the right people, quality people. I know you focus more on like slow and steady, which I can really appreciate. So, how do you go about just, marketing your business? How do you do that? Because a lot of dentists do struggle with that aspect. So,
Well, word of mouth, I think, has been the thing that's really helped us the most. And you can see it,
yeah,
like, for example, look at our Google reviews. And
yeah,
whether patients find me on Google or ZocDoc or Yelp, I always ask them, after thanking them for coming in, and say, okay, how did you find us and why did you choose this practice?
that's a good
Invariably,
question.
they say, because of the reviews. And
Yeah,
people read those, and sometimes I'll hear a mother saying, well, my child was very apprehensive. And I read that review from that mother. They said how kind and, how comforting you were to their, like, 7-year-old. And that's why I chose this practice. So I think that's really the most important thing.
yeah,
Um, I have for the past, it's fairly recent. It's not that many years. As I said, this year will be our 10th year. I think it was about 5 years in. At the consistent advice of colleagues, I started to basically work with a third party, would manage our Google ads.
yeah,
I think that's almost something you have to have in the same way that, if you don't have a website and you don't show up on Google Maps, you probably don't exist in the eyes of most people. There
yeah,
was a time that was optional. Like I
yeah,
don't 15, 20 years ago, Google Maps wasn't that important, or Apple, whatever device anyone's using. But now you got to be on those directories. That's kind of like, I think, a passport.
mm-hmm,
So that's one thing I would recommend to anyone who's starting a practice. Make sure you have a company, and also make sure you
yeah,
meet with them to understand how they're utilizing your funds.
mm,
And because the land of the virtual basically landscape of our business and our industry is constantly shifting. There's certain keywords that are sometimes more
yeah,
in certain areas, like where I'm working, both in Manhattan and in Brooklyn. Invisalign was a big thing, even you know
yeah,
7 years ago when I started basically practicing in Manhattan. Maybe at that time it wasn't as important.
yeah.
Might be certain areas where airway orthodontics all of a sudden is like a really big thing. A lot of people are. So there's always these little pockets. So I think that's really important. I haven't been very, very proactive on my social media. Uh,
I know. I was trying to find you. I was like,
but
where is
we're there.
he?
We
I saw
are.
your website. I found your website and everything.
Yes, we are on Instagram, and I honestly, after years of scratching my head, I finally realized, okay, this is something I can do,
Yeah.
but because nothing is going to happen if I don't do it, I always say, "El mañana." I'm going to do it tomorrow, and I don't. So I've delegated it to a group of really kind people that I'm
Yeah.
working with, and but they of course run everything by me. And yes, every now and then I might put a post there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it's become a lot more meaningful for me when I've approached the idea of marketing from a perspective of generosity,
Mm-hmm.
sharing, experiences, sharing, modalities that some people may not know. For example, patients with open bites, a lot of them we've been able to treat, overwhelming majority of them,
Yeah.
without any surgery. But like 15,
Wow.
20 years ago, all of these patients who had like anything more than like, 4 or 5
Yeah.
millimeter open bite would have to get jaw surgery. So I realized, okay, sharing that is of a service to someone. I'm much more likely to go and share something like that on social media, or to
Yeah.
educative post about why is early treatment important. I was thinking, okay, that's of service to a mother that might be wondering, well, Mary doesn't really need anything right now. Everything seems to be okay. There's a lot of times patients come to me and they're 10 or 11 or 12, and something should have been addressed
Mm-hmm.
a few years before, but even the dentist
Yeah.
didn't catch it because they were so focused on hygiene, and maybe doing a little filling here or there while it
Yeah.
was erupting in a wrong way. So having delegated it at least ensures there's some consistent educational generosity
Yeah.
coming through our social media, and that also like has been encouraging for me to spend a little more time.
Yeah, and I mean, you're a great speaker, like the way you explain and stuff. So I'm rooting for you. I want to see more of you and your videos and you explaining. I tell all my clients I work with, like, you need to be making more educational videos, like of you speaking about certain cases, you talking about the difference between, for example, clear aligners versus braces, like using those key words you mentioned earlier, right? Like, what are people searching up and creating videos on the educational videos because 90% of the population to find the next business, they go Instagram, Google, and maybe TikTok, right? um, they go online to find the next business. So I'm glad to hear, you are incorporating some educational pieces. I'll definitely check out your Instagram. I may send some ideas your way too. But yeah, no, I love to hear that. And what would you what sort of advice would you give to a dentist who is interested in maybe, starting their practice or, they're just getting into the flow of things, they want to acquire patients. Like, what is your advice?
I think the most important decision is that, are you comfortable with wearing all the different hats that
Hmm.
as a business owner you will have to?
Yeah.
Um, I don't have any children, but I feel like it's a little bit like that. It's like a responsibility that you take on
Hmm.
that then rearranges the priorities you have in your life. And work doesn't end when you leave the office and you come
Never
home.
does.
So there's pros and cons to that. And then there's also pros and cons to working with someone for someone else. I think that's the most important thing is for us to know ourselves. Is that okay? What is it that I really need?
Yeah.
Um, and also being very, very like investigating research. Okay, what are the responsibilities I'm going to have? How is my lifestyle going to be different?
Yeah.
And what are my priorities? Is my time really important to me?
Yeah.
Or is, for example, if you work as an associate for many years for another practice, unless you have some kind of agree with them, the day that, things don't work out and you're not at that practice, you're walking away with no equity,
Yeah.
unless you actually went on as a partner of some sort. Or if, of course, if you started your own practice,
Yeah.
then that equity doesn't just land on your lap. Uh, you have to put in what's referred to, I think, as the emotional labor, in addition to the sweat labor, to care for things, to answer calls, to do so many things to ensure that that your practice continues.
Yeah.
And then the other, could you restate your question? You talked about what would be my advice to dentists who are thinking about starting their own practice.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I think the other thing is like we talked about, see what neighborhood you are basically choosing to start a practice and what are the kind of people who are going to be
Mhm.
knocking on your door. And also really investigate about branding. And by branding, I don't mean a logo.
Yeah.
By brand, I mean what kind of expectation you are creating, Because if
Hmm.
your website sends a certain message, but what you're actually doing inside the office is not like that. For example, if you are branding yourself as someone who's very high end and chic, but then you're running a Medicaid mill, then there's going
Yeah.
to be some dissonance there. You're going to attract the wrong people, and they're going to come in and they're going to be upset because they waited, 2 minutes longer than they wanted to. And they're going to leave a bad review for you. So
Hmm.
if you're gonna, like, for example, be in the hotel or hospitality business, you have to decide: are you going to be the Ritz-Carlton, are you going to be a boutique bohemian hotel, or are you going to be a Holiday Inn? There's nothing wrong with any of those, but
Yeah.
decide where you're going and how are you going to set expectations.
Yeah.
And my advice is, and that's something I'm still continuing to practice, is to create remarkable expectations that we can meet.
Hmm.
Okay, like finding out, okay, what is it that my patients really need and want, and making
Yeah.
sure I over deliver in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Ultimately,
that.
at the end of the day, it's about happiness, and
Oh,
my happiness hinges com completely on my patient's happiness.
yeah. Yeah.
If they're happy, I'm happy. All it takes is just one patient who's not happy for me for that day, for that week, until I see that patient again and I can basically address their needs or concerns.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know we're coming up on our time, and I appreciate you again doing this with me. So once I edit this, I'll get it posted, and then I can actually share some clips with you, which you can post on your own social media, and you can use it in your marketing efforts or however you'd like. So before we leave, do you know anyone else who may be interested in doing the podcasts? Would you be able to possibly connect us?
Well, actually, one of my colleagues who used to work in Manhattan
Yeah.
just actually opened up an office very close to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he's got this very beautiful, really neat office that is like, yeah, within walking distance from me. I think he's also, I used to teach at NYU for a couple of
Yeah.
years, where he's actually still on board. So he's got, I think, a very interesting perspective of someone who's active faculty and also
Yeah.
has a practice.
Oh, that'll be so interesting.
I'll
Yeah.
send this information to you, and if anyone else comes, I'll let you know as well.
Yeah, yeah, please. Please do connect me. I think you have my email. So I will definitely send you my number too, just in case if you want to connect us that way. But that would be great. Before we end, is there anything you want to say or
Good luck to you. I hope this
yeah?
becomes rewarding. And
Thank you.
yeah, I would say check out Seth Godin. His
Seth Godin. Yeah, I've heard he's an OG. He's an OG. Yeah.
special, like, and especially his most recent books about
His
strategy
recent.
marketing
Okay, I'll
are
write it down.
yeah, they are
Thank
really.
you. Thank you for sharing that. And again, if there's anything you need, I will definitely also just, as a token, check out your social media, give some feedback, and then you can kind of take it to your team and play with it.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye.